Hi YouTube, it's Trevor here from WN Movie Talk podcast. In this video I'm going to be starting something else. I'm going to start to slowly go through my DVD collection with you, just talking about the films that I've grown up on, the films I like, sometimes the films I don't like. I often find that a bad review is as enjoyable as a good review. Letting you lot get to know me through my films and also gives me the opportunity to nerd out and talk about the films that I like. One of my favourites. Here's a clue. So I thought I'd start this sort of series of videos, and where better to start with the first film that I ever watched at the cinema, and that is Superman the movie. Well, more importantly, I'm going to be talking about the Superman Blu-ray 5-film collection. This one here contains Superman the movie, Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, and Superman Returns. There is another box set, a Blu-ray box set, which includes the Richard Donner version. But don't worry, because I've already got the Richard Donner version. This is just the Warner Brothers sort of Christopher Reeve based films that I'm going to be talking about. But anyway, today, yes, Superman the movie, 1978. Now, I remember watching this, I must have been 3, maybe 4 years old. It's one of my earliest memories. We was at a school, it was my brother's school, back where we used to live. There was a parents' evening, my parents had gone in to see his teachers, and in this school they had like a cinema room, and they were showing Superman the movie in there whilst the parents' evening was going on. So my brother, he took me to the cinema, and I can remember clear as day the movie. I remember the screen peeling back and the Daily Planet logo, the old-fashioned logo, and the little boy talking about the Daily Planet, you know, and Metropolis. You know, this must have been 1982, 1983, something like that. Then it must have played on telly because we had it on video, and I used to watch it on VHS all the time. So completely grew up with the original Superman the movie. And it's a film that I've revisited time and time again through my life. Now, the original DVD that I've got here, there's some really great featurettes on the back, special features. I'm a big special features nerd. So it goes into a lot of detail about sort of the making of the film. But it's a retrospective look. And I love that the filmmakers tell you the gossip that was going on behind the scenes as well. And of course, with Superman the movie, there was a lot of gossip going on behind the scenes where the producers, the Salkinds, was trying to oust Richard Donner. They was making Superman 1, Superman 2 back to back, which is why you've got Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, as well as Superman 2, the Richard Lester cut, which is the theatrical version. It's a shame we didn't get to see the actual Richard Donner cut, because I think that the Richard Donner cut, it lacks something. There's a lot of promise there. And you think if it was as good as this, because let's face it, Superman the movie, it's a film. You know, I always say there's movies and there's films. And a movie is something that they just smash out there to get in the cinemas as quick as possible, generate money. Whereas a film, someone's taken a little bit more time and a little bit more artistic sort of development and made it something special. And certainly Superman the movie is something special. I remember as a child watching the opening scenes, and I used to think those scenes was like boring. You couldn't wait for him to get the suit on, to get into Metropolis, to catch helicopters and crooks and get kittens down from the tree to fight Lex Luthor. But watching it recently, the beginning of the film, it just becomes so much more than that. And it's just got that sort of pastel look about it. There's something real cinematic about the opening scenes, something timeless, something priceless, and it has become that. So yeah, watching it recently, the opening scenes, I found more enjoyable than the end half of the film. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the end half of the film, but I'm just saying that once you got to Superman and Metropolis, it became much more of a comic book, which was intentional. But I really enjoyed the opening scene, is what I'm trying to say. A long way of saying it, I know. Superman 5-film collection. The special features on here, there are some great, quite good special features, but as I was saying earlier, it's not looking back the gossip. You don't hear the truth of what was going on behind the scenes. The making of that they show on here is one that was made at the time that the film was coming out to help promote the film. It's hosted by Christopher Reeve on the first film. I think this is the first 3 actually, Superman 1, 2 and 3. They've got the making of those films. And it's, like I say, it's produced by the Salkinds. It's a promotional piece. You don't hear all that sort of backstabbing and the politics that was going on behind, because we know that Richard Donner was clocking up quite a bill, I think, because he was taking his time to make the film right. And the Salkinds wanted to get the film out there as early as possible. So they released the first film early, before the second film had been wrapped. And they'd probably done this to see how it fared. It fared really, really well. And then they thought, on the back of the success of Superman 1, we can release Superman 2. Let's get rid of Donner. He's costing us too much. And bring in Richard Lester. Richard Lester, known for the Beatles films, I think, wasn't he? And a lot of the cast didn't like it. Gene Hackman said he wouldn't come back for the second film. Marlon Brando, he backed out of the second film, and they couldn't use his footage that he'd filmed for the first one. That's the reason why you don't see him playing Jor-El in the second film. You meet the mother again, and she's the one guiding Superman in the second film. But let's go back to Superman the movie. Christopher Reeve, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure many of you out there as well, no one has ever played Superman quite like Christopher Reeve. And it's not just the Superman part of it, it's how he plays Clark Kent and Superman as if they're two separate characters. You can watch every other incarnation of the Man of Steel since, your Dean Cain, the new Superman series, and even Henry Cavill. There's no difference between Clark Kent and Superman except for the glasses, and that's what I find so unbelievable when I'm watching it. It's not plausible that no one can see Superman in Clark Kent and vice versa, whereas, you know, Christopher Reeve plays it completely separate. His Clark Kent is bumbling, he's a bit of a fool, he's clumsy, but he's kind-hearted. He's a fish out of water in Metropolis, you know, and marching about with Margot Kidder. He's always one step behind her, sort of trying to squeeze through people. He doesn't like the hustle and bustle. He comes from Smallville, a little farming community in the middle of nowhere, and he is a completely different entity, and it just works really well. Then we've got Lex Luthor, played by Gene Hackman, and Otis as well, played by Ned Beatty. Now, Ned Beatty steals the show for me in this film as Otis. Mr. Luthor! Mr. Luthor! So, yeah, the special features, as I said, aren't quite as good in this as they are on the DVD. I think there's better documentaries on there. There's more documentaries on there. So I won't be getting rid of my DVD. But then we're moving on to Superman 2 now. This came out in 1980. As I said, it's directed by Richard Lester. This time they've altered a few things from the original script, because you must remember Mario Puzo was called in to write the two films together, and Tom Mankiewicz was brought in by Richard Donner, I think, to sort of do the script editing and just to tidy it up. And then when Richard Lester come on, you know, you can't bring a director in without them wanting to sort of change a few things up and make it their own. So there's certain scenes that they've got rid of, as you can tell when you watch the Richard Donner version, which, you know, it's, as I said, the Richard Donner version would have been great if it was all there, but it's not all there. So a lot of what you see is still Richard Lester's work. It doesn't really work as a film. It's not as good as the theatrical version, but I'm sure it would have been had they sort of stuck it out. But the story is great. You've got the villains, Zod, Terrence Stamp playing him so cold. There's nothing there. There's no emotion. You know, he's just complete evil incarnate. And then he's got his two sidekicks, Ursa, played by Sarah Douglas, and Non, played by Jack O'Halloran, the big sort of mute dummy. They're just great villains, and they slowly start to work out that they've got these superhero powers. The first difference between the two films is how they escape. So originally intended in the Richard Donner cut, the bombs that Superman sends up into space in the original film, the nuclear missiles that cause the earthquake at the end, Superman sends that up, and it's the repercussions of that blowing off in space break them out of the Phantom Zone, which is just a piece of glass flipping about. So they're released into space, they land on the moon, and begin their adventures. Obviously in Superman 2 we see Lois Lane over in France, so you know, these are additional scenes. She's gone to the Eiffel Tower, and there's the bomb. Harry Potter's uncle is in these scenes, Richard Griffiths, I've noticed. It's good watching these films back and picking up on things you didn't pick up on as a child. So yeah, we're seeing Richard Griffiths there, a young Richard Griffiths, who, yeah, Harry Potter fans will know as Uncle Vernon. And Lois Lane, I mean, Margaret Kidder, I think she's brilliant. In the first Superman, she's really great. And the second one, she still got it. You know, she tails off towards the end of the series. But then I think they all do a bit. Except for Christopher Reeve, he just gets better and better. Even in 4, which is a rubbish film, he's still brilliant. But we'll get onto that later. But I always think Lois Lane, she's meant to be this fantastic journalist, but she is atrocious at spelling. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't ring true. And some of the words she tries to spell and gets wrong just seems quite bizarre. But anyway, yeah, so she's in Paris. There's a bomb on the Eiffel Tower. Superman flies that up into space, and that's what releases Zod and that to the Earth. So as a kid as well, this one was always great to me. It was a fantastic film. There's none that I didn't enjoy as a child, except for 4. It was the one I've only watched once. So watching it this time was the second time in my life that I'd ever seen Superman 4. But revisiting the Superman series now and this box set, I watched the Richard Lester cut first, and then went back and watched the Richard Donner cut. As I said, I didn't enjoy the Richard Donner cut as much. There's a few scenes he's put in there, or one scene in particular that he's put back in, which is the screen test basically of Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. She's clicking on to the fact that Clark Kent is Superman, and she gets a gun and shoots him basically, and he survives, and then he takes off his glasses, and this is all a screen test, so he looks different, she looks different, his glasses are different, and they've just wedged it into the film. And it's a shame bits like that happen, but it was a good scene, and that's how she discovers that he is Superman, and then she reveals that she just fired blanks at him anyway. So I think that was a good little scene. She's using her cunning to catch him out. There's also a scene at the beginning where she jumps out of the Daily Planet. She bets her life on the fact that he's Superman, and she jumps out, and then he does a load of things to stop her from falling. In the Richard Lester version, all we see is when they're at the Grand Canyon, she jumps in the river, and he's like running along beside her, trying not to be Superman, but using his eyes and things to knock down a branch to save her. The differences between the Donner cut and the Lester cut, there's a lot less of Gene Hackman in the Lester cut. You know, there's scenes at the end where they all go into the Fortress of Solitude, and someone dressed up as Gene Hackman, and it doesn't always fit, and they drop him off at different places. So there's a lot of scenes filmed without him because he didn't return for the Richard Lester version. I think that's also why he's not in Superman 3 as well. But ultimately, we will never know really how good the Richard Donner cut will be, because the Richard Donner cut, he's had to use a lot of Richard Lester's scenes to sort of make the film. But as I was saying about the difference between a film, even though this is Superman the movie, I said earlier, it feels like a film to me. Richard Donner, it's got something more stylish about him, whereas this just is popcorn fodder. Production values aren't quite as good. It's a lot sort of cheesier, a lot sillier. Nowhere near as silly as Superman 3 though. Let's get on to Superman 3 because it's going to be a very long video else. Superman 3, directed again by Richard Lester, starts off like a carry-on film, sort of like a Superman meets Benny Hill. A very silly scene, and I never noticed as well watching it this time how when the credits come up it just blurs right across the screen and it ruins the scene, having the credits rolling over that action. The credit sequence as well on Superman 2, going back a minute, and it just has that prolonged, you basically watch the whole of the first film again in the opening credits, and I think that's a bit much. You didn't really need that. They wasn't released that far apart that people had forgotten what happened in Superman 1, and there was no reason really to remind them, except for maybe about the Zod bits, but they don't connect. You can understand what if they'd have done it on the Richard Donner cut, because you see Superman throwing the missile up there, but the missile is irrelevant, so the beginning of that film is irrelevant. It just doesn't make sense, but not as silly as Superman 3. So it starts off, it's slapstick comedy, but it doesn't even start there, does it? The very first scene is Richard Pryor going into the dole office. Basically he's trying to pick up his welfare check, and they're saying, no, you're not eligible anymore, you're too lazy, go and get a job. And then he's smoking a cigarette and he looks at the match pack, then it says become a computer analyst. And who'd have thought that he wasn't just a computer analyst, he becomes this computer genius? And it doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. It is completely ridiculous, because as he's doing all these computery things, he's like I don't understand why I'm good at it, but I am. It just doesn't... Computers don't work like that, do they? Surely you'd have to have some understanding of what you're doing to be able to do all these things. It's bizarre. But then computers can't alter the weather, can they? And also at the end, where he like gets Webster. I don't know if Webster was a character from the old comics, but in this one they haven't got Lex Luthor. They got Robert Vaughn playing Webster. But Richard Pryor is sort of working for him because he's been stealing money basically off of Webster through his computer genius. And then at the end, when Webster again threatens to put him in jail, he's like, no, you need me, plus I've designed this. And he throws out these several scraps of paper with this drawing of a computer. And then they're like, oh yeah, we'll build that for you. It's a computer that can do everything. And that just doesn't make sense when you see the actual computer and you see all the circuitry behind them. And you're thinking, well, whereabouts was that on those 6 bits of paper and a fag packet? It doesn't make sense. Nothing in the film makes sense. But Richard Pryor is a strange choice for this film, and it becomes a sort of a Richard Pryor vehicle. And he's doing his sort of goofy ad-libbing, and it's good fun. It's great watching Richard Pryor. I love Richard Pryor. But that being said, there's something really endearing about Superman 3 still. There's some of my favourite scenes in there from the trilogy, really. I really enjoy the scene with the chemical plant where it's all going up. And of course that links, he goes back and gets those chemicals later on, takes it into the supercomputer to kill it at the end. But the scene that always stands out for me, and this time around watching it again, was the scene with the bad Superman. And I mean, Christopher Reeve, again, this is why he's so brilliant. You see him turning bad, you believe it. He just, not only has he got a bit of stubble and looks a bit more brute, he looks like he really doesn't give a toss, doesn't he? His performance throughout as that bad, tormented Superman, it is worth an Oscar. I'm sure he didn't get an Oscar nomination at that time, especially not for Superman 3, but what a great performance. And another reason why Christopher Reeve will always be the ultimate Superman, and no one else is ever going to fit into his cape, in my opinion. Yeah, some really great scenes throughout Superman 3. Again, the box set, it's got the Salkinds' own documentaries. They're not bad documentaries. Like I say, there's none of the gossip, but it does show you how they create these films, and some great interviews. It shows you the technology, and they're about an hour-long documentary on each one, so they are really good. The only one that didn't have the documentary is on the second disc with Superman 4 and Superman Returns. The documentaries on the Superman Returns weren't quite as good, and they didn't even have a documentary on Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, because it's not Salkinds' production at this point. Canon Films took it on. They convinced Christopher Reeve to come back, and they said, we'll make the Superman film that you want. So he wanted this film all about sort of the nuclear issue. So they created Nuclear Man. They bring Gene Hackman back as Lex Luthor. I mean, he's quite good in it. There's a really young Jim Broadbent in there, which surprised me to see it. He comes in with, like, they're arms dealers, aren't they? I think they're basically arms dealers, and when Superman is banning all the nuclear bombs, throwing them all into space in a big net, ridiculous. There's ridiculous bits throughout Superman 4 as well. It does get crazy. But yeah, you see Jim Broadbent, also the actor who plays Eckhart in Tim Burton's Batman, he's in there. William Hootkins, good to see him in there as well. Margaret Kidder comes back because she's not really the love interest in this one. She's sort of like a friend of Clark's, which there is a scene at the beginning where Clark takes her off, flies off with her, tells her he's Superman basically, and then brings her back and just kisses her, and she forgets all about it like he did in Superman 2. And you just think, stop doing this to her, you're cruel. You know, would he really keep doing that to her? That's like completely messing with her, isn't it? And messing with her head, and it's just like he gets off on it. It's strange. But Superman 4, yeah, as I said, Canon Films offered Christopher Reeve the chance to make it. They basically took the money they got to make Superman 4, and didn't they put half of the money to Masters of the Universe or something? Didn't they make that at the same time and sort of split the budget? And instead of making one good Superman film with a lot of money, taking the money for the profits of that and then making a good Masters of the Universe film, they made a shit Superman film and a shit Masters of the Universe film. And when I say shit, it is shit. It is comical how bad it is. And I know me and my friend Nath done the podcast about Supergirl. There's a video of that where we completely rip Supergirl to pieces, which a lot of you out there are really defensive over the 1984 Supergirl, but it is an awful film. I'm sorry, I'm not going to change my opinion on that. And it's not just because of the time, as some people have said. You can't say that because it was the time it was made. No, Superman, the movie was older and it's better. But Superman 4 is possibly worse. It probably is worse than Supergirl. There's just so much ridiculous stuff in it. Just from the opening scenes where we meet Lex Luthor, and he hasn't got Otis anymore, he's got his nephew, who's just sort of whiny, sort of surf. He's got this surfer bum voice, but he dresses a bit like, I don't know, he's like, yeah, a cross between Bill and Ted and Ferris Bueller, but really annoying. Nuclear Man, it just doesn't make sense. They're like, oh, we've got this little container, this vial, and this is going to make a little man, and then when it gets thrown into the sun he'll explode, and we'll put some little material in there and then he'll come fully dressed. It's just stupid. There's loads of stupid bits. Basically the Daily Planet is getting bought out by sort of a Rupert Murdoch character, and Lacey Warfield is the daughter of this tycoon. But yeah, she falls in love with Clark Kent, and there's no apparent reason why she's falling for him. It's just, she's got the hots for him. It is just a bit strange. And at one point, Nuclear Man also falls in love with her, and he takes her up into space, and she's just floating around in space. She's not cold, she's not suffocating. She's fine in space, she can breathe. It's just stupid things like that, and the effects are just terrible. Some of it looks like animated. Some of the flying scenes, you can see almost like a thick black line all around the characters. The blue screen is just nowhere near as effective. And then, you know, years and years later, we've had the dawn of CGI. And film director Bryan Singer, who had made at this point The Usual Suspects, and I think the X-Men films had also been coming out at that point, he's got an idea for a new Superman film. Superman Returns, but he wants it to take place after Superman 2. So it's completely discounting Superman 3 and Superman 4, and that's where the Superman Returns comes in. And Superman in this one is played by Brandon Routh. He's almost as good as Christopher Reeve. He's almost got the difference between Clark Kent and Superman, but I don't think the Clark Kent has been written as well as it was in the originals. But it's a great return to the original format. We haven't got Gene Hackman, but we got a Kevin Spacey. Now he really hams it up as Lex Luthor, but horrible, you know, a proper villain in this. From the opening scene where he's talking to this billionaire woman who's on her deathbed and she dies. He's completely hoodwinked her, but he wants her boat. He's just real horrible. There's real viciousness to him. And I think he was good. A bit more corny, perhaps, than Gene Hackman. But overall, Superman Returns, there's something missing in it. I did enjoy it. A lot more than Superman 4, but it just seems really long-winded. And the story is that Superman thought that Krypton still existed, so he's sort of, oh, I must get up to Krypton and go and have a look. So he's been away for 5 years, he's flown up to Krypton, he's come back, and by this time Lois Lane has got with someone else. She's got a child. Lois Lane's quite good. She's not Margaret Kidder, she hasn't got that sort of ferocious edge like Margaret Kidder did. But I always think, why don't they realise that the day that Clark Kent walks back into the Daily Planet, Superman returns? You know, is that a coincidence that happens on the same day? But it does work to see Superman in the CG. There's some really great scenes. The scene with the plane, with the rocket on top, which is sending him into space, which Lois Lane's on. Some of the CGI is good. Some of it's a bit flaky. Some of the flying scenes, it looks like he's not there. But then, you know, Superman 1, 2, 3 and 4 all sort of had moments where it's like, oh, that's a bit dodgy. Some of the flying scenes in Superman 1 with Clark and Lois, it's almost like they're just lying on a blue bed. When he turns, she turns exactly the same, and some of it's a bit ropey, but some of, yeah, watching Superman fly in Superman Returns is a bit ropey. But it was good to revisit these films, and worth buying the box set. But if you're into your special features, then just try and track down a copy of the old Superman the movie. There's some real good special features on that DVD. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all again very shortly. Cheese!